how many kids out there have stopped playing a sport or have quit because a coach they felt didn't care about them, right? And that's what love is. That's what love is. It's showing other people you care. There's a sign in my office that says they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Life is about relationships. And
welcome back to another episode of Beyond Coaching, podcast of the Impactful Coaching Project. And excited to welcome today Dr. Levi Nelson. Levi is a author, speaker, former coach, part of the Positive Coaching Alliance. Levi, you do an awful lot. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in. Tell us about your coaching journey, and then you have a philosophy you wrote about called the lead philosophy. So incorporate how you develop that.
Sure. Yeah. So I was one of those kids. I think I always kind of envisioned myself being a coach when I was young. And I don't know why this just popped in my head right now. That they made a video game when I was in high school back in the early 2000s, and it was called Head Coach, I think. And I remember you couldn't actually play the game. The only thing you could do was like call the plays, and you were in charge of roster management and all that stuff. And I might have been the only one who bought that game, but I kind of always grew up wanting to be a coach. And when I got to college, I went into radio and television. That was my major. And I decided that I would take just a general education class called Intro to Coaching, just for the fun of it, because I had always wanted to be a coach, passionate about sport. And Rob, you've been around the game long enough. You're a high school athlete, and one of the huge draws to playing a high school sport is just the miracle of team, right? You're part of a team and all that. And well, pretty soon that roller coaster ends, and they ask you to get off, right, if you're ready or not, right? So in high school, I was a team captain of our football team, and you get to college, and I thought I would go this route, and I just miss being part of a team. So I'm taking this class called Intro to Coaching, and the instructor, instantly when I looked at him and heard him speak, I said, man, that is who I want to be when I grow up. His name is Mike Duve. They're at the University of Akron. And I asked him if I could help him coach. He was an assistant football coach at a school. So I was all of, I think, 20 years old, maybe something like that, when I started coaching as an assistant coach at Talmadge High School in Ohio. And I did that for 5 years, and it just kind of called in my heart that I needed to change my major, right? So I went for my master's in coaching, and I felt in my heart as well after 5 years that it was time to pursue a head coaching job. So Rittman High School in Ohio gave me that opportunity. I was there for 4 years, moved on to Field High School in Ohio, and then we moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin in 2020 to accept a head football job here at the high school level. So that's kind of been my coaching journey. And along the way, if any coach is listening to this, you're a coach in the school, they're going to ask you to do something else, right? So at one point I was a head track coach. I've been a tennis coach, all those things, and just very passionate about coaching and using sport as a platform to teach life lessons.
So I have your book sitting right in front of me. I read it this week. Highly recommend it. Tell us about your lead philosophy and how that developed.
So the lead philosophy is, to me, it's one of those things that it develops it influences every decision I make as a person. And it's my coaching philosophy. When I was going for my master's, Rob, one of my final assignments was to come up with my own coaching philosophy. And one thing, when you're in college and you're in your major, a lot of times those projects are so exciting because it's what you're passionate about, right? So I come up with, I think it was maybe 12 pages or something, on Tony Dungy and Joe Ehrman and Lou Holtz, Vince Lombardi, Jimmy Valvano, all these coaches I respected. And you're trying to share what you believe through these coaches. And I turned it in, and my professor, the gentleman I was telling you about earlier, he gave it back to me and he said, you know what, Levi, no one is going to remember 12 pages. And by the way, I see where you can talk to me about John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, right? But what do you believe? And he handed me a book by Pete Carroll, and the book was called Win Forever. And in the book, Pete Carroll says, you know what? You've got to have a coaching philosophy that is 25 words or less. One of those things that if you're in an elevator, right, and you're talking to someone, you can kind of spit that thing out in 30 seconds. And my jaw just, hit the floor because I realized that my own coaching philosophy was just, too broad and too long. So I kind of put that in the back of my head as I continued to coach. And I tried to narrow down, okay, what are the characteristics? What are the traits that I'm very passionate about? And I started kind of making this list. And one day, this was kind of a light bulb moment for me in my life. I was dating a girl whose brother played high school football, and he came home from practice one day, and he put a piece of paper on the table, and the paper said pain, Pain, and basically it said, gentlemen, we're going to be successful this year if we can buy into the pain. And I think it stood for I'm trying to think. Persevere, accountability, integrity, and never quit, right? And those are all terrific things. Actually, it was purpose. That's it. Purpose, accountability, integrity, and never quit. And while these are all great traits, right? And I believe in all of those, to me, the word pain just, it seemed a little negative for my liking, right? So I said, okay, now it's time. Let's look at all of my characteristics. And I came up with maybe 10 or 12. And I said, well, I really like this 4-letter acronym. It's easy to remember 4, right? You think about 4 terms for as a max for a president, 4 years. 4 years for a president, 4 seasons. 4 quarters in a football game. So a lot of power in the number of 4. And so I said, I'm going to pick 4. And to me, it was really important, Rob, that love came first. That was really important to me because I think that's the greatest motivator in this world is love. So I really wanted that to come first. I said, okay, I'm going to put love first. I got to think of a 4-letter acronym that starts with L. And to me, the other 2 big traits that I really wanted in there, and people kind of call it the controllables, right? Focus on what you control. We've heard that in sports before. Well, to me, as I've studied, I've learned that we can always control our effort and our attitude, right? So for me, I wanted effort and attitude in there. And I started looking around and thinking about my influences. And I thought about Vince Lombardi and Lou Holtz and some of these coaches. And the word discipline just screamed off the map. In fact, I think that might be one of my greatest attributes, as a father and a husband, is discipline. So anyway, I looked at this acronym LEAD, and it popped off the page for me. I think that's what we're trying to do as coaches. We're trying to equip our young people to be leaders, right? We want them to go out and to lead not only on the playing field, on the court, but in their personal lives, right? Can they take that to the classroom? Can they take that to their home? And then those 4 traits within LEAD, love, effort, attitude, and discipline. I just think the world would be a much better place if everyone could say, okay, I'm going to care about other people more than myself. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be positive, even when things aren't going good, right? Even when circumstances might, be tough to deal with. And then I'm just going to be really consistent and do this every day, be disciplined with it. So that's the lead philosophy, and it's kind of taken off from there.
That's good stuff. Now tell me, because we believe in a approach similar of what we study and talk about here. And sometimes there's this counter of, hey, that's great, that's fluffy stuff, but I want to win. What's your response to that coach listening, saying, yeah, all that sounds good, but if I don't win, what's the point, or I'm out of a job?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. And that frustrates me, that answer a lot.
Me too.
Just because I've tried to share this topic with different clinics and whatnot, and I literally have gotten responses back that say this clinic's going to be all about X's and O's. We get enough of the mushy gushy stuff somewhere else, right? I've literally got that response, and it just irks me as a coach because I have a doctorate in sport and performance psychology. Right. So part of my final project for my doctorate, my dissertation, you might call it, was to look within the field of sport and performance psychology and to prove that love, effort, attitude, and discipline actually translate to wins, right? My favorite work that I do in my life, I get to serve as a trainer for the Positive Coaching Alliance. And I think a lot of times people hear maybe that name, Positive Coaching Alliance, and they might have this idea in their head that, we're going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and everything is great. Everybody gets a trophy. But we strive to tell parents and coaches and athletes that it's not that you have to choose winning or you have to choose character development or lead or whatever you want to call it. You can do both at the same time. And you know what? There are a lot of very successful coaches who coach that way. Right. And especially, gosh, at the youth level, how many kids out there have stopped playing a sport or have quit because a coach they felt didn't care about them. Right. And that's what love is. That's what love is. It's showing other people you care. There's a sign in my office that says they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Life is about relationships. And we know that the science shows us that the people are intrinsically motivated if they feel connected to the people they are working with. And I'll tell you what, Rob, as a coach, I've always wanted our players to be intrinsically motivated, right? I want them to show up to practice excited to be there with the goal in mind of I'm going to get better today. Well, we know that if you have that loving relationship, and by the way, love is such a tough word to explain because our culture might say that it's something when it's really not, right? Love is about sacrifice. Love is about so many more things than what I think we see on TV or what we hear about or what's portrayed on social media, right? So love is sacrifice, and so there's a lot of successful coaches who do it, and the coach who says I have to win, I would say, well, maybe if we focused on these things more, it would lead to more wins. After all, if you want the fruit, you need to water the root, right? Yeah. So we need to focus on these things and not just the X's and O's.
Well, it's interesting because a book I talk about quite a bit on here, listeners probably are sick of me talking about it. I read it a few years ago, a book called Do Hard Things. And they look at the research in building toughness, resilience, grit. And they come out with some kind of toughness on a team, which everybody wants their team and their kids to be tough, comes down to two things. One is the ability to get better, have an environment and get better. And the second one is essentially authenticity, and psychological safety is the term they use, meaning as long as I follow the rules of the team, I get to be part of the community. And under that, I think, is love. So the old school, I need to scream at them until I'm blue in the face, and that's what's going to get the best out of them. It's just a fallacy most of the time.
Yeah.
but I don't know how we got there in the culture, which I think we're coming out of it, that's the way to motivate people. So we'll go off script here. How do you think we've gotten that idea in our head that we can't love and be tough and win?
Well, Rob, I'll answer your question, but I want to pose something to you first. You mentioned Do Hard Things, the book. I've got to say that's a phenomenal book. I ordered it. I was going through it, but I've got to admit, Rob, I found it so factual. It was difficult for me to understand all of it. And that's someone who has a doctorate. So if anybody else picks up the book and struggles through it, know that you're not alone. It took me a long time to read each chapter. I kind of had to go through them again and again. But what a phenomenal book! I strongly recommend that.
I know. Yeah, I know some people, and it's kind of. I think I read it twice to feel like I could absorb it. But I know some people that are reading it 3 pages at a time because they thought it was so good, but it took so much to absorb.
Correct. Yeah, it's phenomenal. So don't lose heart if you've started that. Your other question was kind of how did we get to this place? And I think, Rob, that a lot of people when they start coaching, they coach the way they were coached, right? So a lot of coaches might not know that the traits of LEAD actually produce more winning. They're just kind of maybe used to what they were used to, right? Kind of that old school style, Bobby Knight. People might understand that. Of the yeller and the screamer, right? You think back to some very successful coaches. You think to Vince Lombardi. He was a yeller and a screamer. But I think people sometimes fail to realize or make the connection of, okay, certainly different times, but also a different age group, right? So not that I'm condoning some of the things that maybe Bobby Knight did or Vince Lombardi did, but also say they weren't coaching youth athletes. Right. So if you're in a position where you're coaching youth athletes, I think we have to be, even more positive, even more, loving in how we operate. And again, that's not saying we can't be demanding, but, especially some of the language and different things that I've heard coaches talk with who are dealing with maybe grown adults, right? So again, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Generally, too, the credentials for coaching are interesting, right? Because for a lot of people, it's did you play the sport?
Yep.
Right. It's, oh, you were a great hockey player, therefore you must be a great hockey coach. When necessarily that might not be accurate at all, right? Things could have come really naturally to you, and maybe maybe you're not cut out to be the greatest coach. And I think especially some of the individuals who just they make it to elite levels, whether that's college or pro ranks, do have trouble coaching because maybe they were always the best on their team, right? That's how they succeeded. That's how they got so far. And now you've got to coach the last man on the bench, right? You've got to coach the second string, and how do you do that? So one of the things I'll mention, Rob, this is really cool. Something that I've got into this past year is I've been working with USA Hockey as a coach developer. And I say that not to brag, beat on my chest, anything like that. I say it because I just want to applaud USA Hockey for what they are doing. Essentially, if you want to coach hockey here in the United States, you need to go through USA Hockey classes that are not based on X's and O's. Sure, there are some skill things within the clinic, but I would say they're minimal. What it's more of is this is how you you meet a athlete where he or she is, depending on their age, right? Because we know that a 5-year-old and an 18-year-old's brains are not the same. And this is how we make an environment that's fun and challenging and makes athletes want to come back and play the sport again, and work hard. So USA Hockey is just they've put together this fascinating curriculum of this is how to teach, this is how to coach, not necessarily here are skills and drills and just implement those. So any governing bodies who are looking at how do we train our coaches, how do we increase numbers, I would say please look at USA Hockey. I know they've worked with the United States of Coaching Excellence on creating some content. So they just do an amazing job. And that's what I love about Positive Coaching Alliance as well, is all of the things that PCA presents are based in science, right? They're based on sports psychology. Like I'll just share one with you now, Rob. I love this. And it talks about, being positive as a coach. There is science. This was found by Dr. John Gottman. And there was science that found that the ratio of positive comments to negative interactions for human relationships to thrive, that ratio needs to be 5-1. Okay, so every positive comment you make, it needs to be 5 to every 1 negative comment. And this Dr. John Gottman, he studied elementary school children and married couples. Right. So think about, if you're married on this call, think about it, your friends, think about your boss at work. Right. But if that relationship is every positive, there's a negative. Right. If the score's 10-10, that relationship is not going to thrive. Right. So PCA says we've looked at the science, and here are, here it is 5-1. And then here are some ways that you can do that as a coach. So I love coaching education because unfortunately, especially at the youth level, I think a lot of the qualifications for can you coach are you available during practice time? Right. And can you pass some of the background stuff that we've got going? There's unfortunately not a ton of coaching education that goes on, at certain youth levels. So I just applaud the organizations out there that want to bring this content to coaches, regardless if it's, what sport it is, right? If you've got young people under your supervision, then we can certainly help them be good at sports, and we can help them be better people just by sharing some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's what got us going down the path with some of the stuff we're doing with this podcast, and then the research is me and my partner were both young coaches and just kind of had to learn on the fly and getting training. And I've started saying this as an AD. When I look back at my now nearly 10 years as an AD, I've rarely had an issue with a coach or had to let somebody go due to content knowledge. It Correct. Is the team cohesion, leadership, where they have a moment that it just gets away from them and they can't get it back, and it's all those things where we just need to do better training.
And Rob, I feel like, a lot of times maybe in high school, it's reactive, right? Mm-hmm. It's an athlete did this, a coach did this. Well, here's the punishment, instead of, like I alluded to earlier, if you want the fruit, you got to start with the root. You got to water that. And let's bring all of our coaches in and let's talk about, how to coach and character development, and let's be proactive. Again, I think, and I would applaud any athletic director who gets behind something like this, because I have found it, Rob. I don't know if you found it this way, but sometimes I'm at a school and, I'm about lead. I'm about love, effort, attitude, and discipline. And that's the way we're going to do it. And in our program here, here's how we're going to conduct ourselves. But at the same school, another coach might have a totally different culture, right? So like, I remember I was at a school one time where I've got a rule, Rob, that I don't curse. it's just kind of who I am as a person, but I don't allow our coaches to curse, in front of high school kids. And that's for a lot of reasons, but let's go just to the discipline aspect, right? If we're going to demand toes behind the line and we need to be disciplined in our assignments, then I think it starts with little things like let's be disciplined in how we speak, right? That's not pleasing to everyone. So we're going to hold ourselves to this discipline. So that was in our culture, right? However, kids would end football season and roll into basketball season, and maybe the locker room just filled with abusive language. I even heard coaches using abusive language, foul language, and I think that's hard for the kids, right? I think that's hard for an athlete who says, "Oh, well, I go to this school, but in this program, I can act this way when um, when I'm on this team, I act a different way because maybe I want to fit in or whatnot." And it's just not a good recipe. So any AD who can get all of their coaches on the same playing field, and it doesn't have to be lead, right? It could be your own stuff. But just get everyone to buy into the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's the term I've heard, and we've spent a lot of time on the three-dimensional coaching philosophy, but it's a framework. And here's the framework we're working from, and there are parameters to that. And then I think it's important coaches have their freedom within the system, within the framework to develop. And I mean, an old boss of mine used to say, all communities are exclusive. You have to follow certain rules if you want to be a part of them. And I don't think athletic departments or teams are any different. So where I'm at Friends University, we're a Christian school, and there is the language piece to it. There is we're going to go to chapel once a week as a team, and we're going to talk about things of faith. And that's part of our framework, and how that manifests itself can be a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So it's it's interesting stuff. Let's dive into, we've kind of talked around it a few times of internal, external motivation. I'll lead with a statement, then hear you respond to it. And I saw it in your book I feel like you were full of ways to both externally motivate, but also develop internal motivation. And we've talked a lot about, I think we're both data and research geeks a little bit. I've read a lot on how we talk about transformational coaching, and everybody talks glowingly about that. I believe in that. But I've also read research that says that relationship starts with transactional coaching of you do this, I do that, and we establish some trust. So curious, that's a long-winded way to say, talk about internal, external motivation and building trust through action. Just kind of take it whatever way you want.
Sure. I'll just go with this, Rob. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I had one of my former assistant coaches call me last week. He just became a head coach. And, one of the fun things I think about coaching, regardless of what it is there's not one way to do it, right? Like if there was one offense that worked the best, every single team would run it. But every coach has their different ideas and puts their own flavor on things. But the coach called me and he said, "Hey, in the weight room, right? Like, talk to me with your background about goals." He said, "Do we do a top 5 lift type thing? Like, what do we do?" And I kind of stopped him right there. And I said, "Well, let me tell you a couple things that I did, and let me tell you why I believed in them." I think every coach needs to find a system of what they believe in, right? Because you've got to defend it. And for me, there were a couple of things I really wanted to develop, that intrinsic motivation. And we know through self-determination theory that people have to feel good about what they do if they want to be intrinsically motivated, meaning the motivation that comes from within. If there's coaches on here, you might think back to every 3 or 4 years or so, you get that one athlete who just doesn't even need a coach, right? They're always going 100% in everything they do. They want to be the best, and you're like, wow, how could I clone this kid, right? Like, how could I develop several of these? Well, one way we did it, and I got this from a book from Jason Selk. And the book is called 10-Minute Toughness. It's a great read. He was the former sports psychologist for the St. Louis Cardinals. And what he did is talked about, here is 10 minutes within your practice that's going to help develop mental toughness. And let me just kind of get into it. And what I did is I took his list and I kind of recreated it our way. So what we did is inside of a player's locker, right? So let's imagine you're a player on our team. You get to the facility and you open up your locker to change for, we'll say, lifting. You open up your locker and it says, hey, what are 3 things I'm thankful for today? So that's at the top under pre-practice. Now, on this magnet, we made a dry erase version on top, right? So the student, a lot of times it's family, faith, friends, family, football, friends, those are common answers. But every once in a while, you get some gems. You get, I'm thankful for my math teacher who helped me with this project today. I'm thankful for my mom. I'm thankful for my dad. You get some good things. I had a 6th grader in one of my classes today said he was thankful for ceiling tiles, right? And you're like, I wonder what made him think of that. But that's good. He's thankful for something, right? So there is proof in gratitude journaling that it's going to reduce stress and anxiety, and that's important no matter what age you are. And this is just me, Rob. I have found in the past I used to give out like an actual binder and a book, and I ask kids to write it down. It created a lot of work for me as a coach. I had to make these copies every single day.
Sounds like you're asking for frustration too.
Yeah,
papers.
Absolutely. And then you find them on the floor at the end of the year. They're all jammed in a kid's locker. So we went to this dry erase board because at the end of the day, right, you can just wipe it off, and there's one place to go. But then what I think is really interesting about Dr. Selk's work is underneath the gratitude, and that's something I added on there, but it says, hey, what is one goal I have for practice today? Or in this case, we're envisioning them going to the weight room. What is one goal I have in the weight room today? Now, Rob, I really like this question because when I was a youth athlete, when I was in high school, I had this idea that I got better because I went to practice. Right? I just kind of figured, I'm going to practice. That means I'm getting better. And we know that's not the case, right? It's the same. You can go to school. It doesn't mean you learn anything. You could go to your job. It doesn't mean you actually get things accomplished, right? So let's be intentional about what we want to get better at. And that was great for, back to the weight room example. Somebody might put, I want to make sure I get parallel on my squat, right? Or I want to, make sure I'm a good spotter with my partner, or I want to make sure I don't take a lot of rest in between my sets, whatever it might be. Now, they go up to practice. That took them just maybe a minute or two, right? As a coach, you now are able to look inside their locker, maybe at your position group, maybe at, a student who's been struggling. You can open it up and see what his or her goal is for that session. Then, when they're stretching, they're doing a dynamic stretch, you can go up and talk to that athlete about their goal. And what are you doing now? You're forming a connection. They feel like you're invested in what they want to accomplish, in their goals. Maybe as a coach, you look at their goal and you say, that's not a very good goal, right? Let's talk about this, right? Let's be more specific with this goal. How could we be more, timely with it? Is that a measurable goal, right? So each day they set an intention, and then after the weight room or after practice, they open up their locker and there's a question. It says, what did I do well today? And the athlete can write down something they did well. It says, what do I want to improve upon? And then the final question says, hey, between now and the next time we compete, right, what are the things I can do to help change the result that I want? And I just love that because, again, it takes the athletes a few minutes. By the way, coach, it does not eat into your practice time, right? We are developing mental toughness before and after practice. as a coach, you see a lot of things. You see who's not going to do it, right? Who's not going to be disciplined, right? You can also see maybe the athlete wrote they thought they did whatever it is really well today. And you're like, I'm not sure they did. You can have a conversation with them. I had an athlete one time wrote that he did nothing well during that practice. And this was a check for me as a coach. I could go up to his position coach and say, hey, we've got to be more positive with this athlete, right? We've got to catch him being good if we want that 5-to-1 ratio. And then the next day I could see that athlete and say, hey, we got to be a little bit easier on ourselves, and let's try to think back and what did we do well. So again, this is just kind of what we did with their locker. But I went on to talk to my coach about the actual weight room. And I told him the story of when I was in high school. I don't think I really developed in it really until maybe my senior years when I started kind of to grow. I was an offensive lineman. However, I was not very strong in the weight room. And I remember going in there as a freshman and sophomore and seeing the top 5 bench press and just feeling depleted, right? Because I can't even bench press one plate on each side, right? Which was 135 at the time. How am I going to get 220? Right? It's useless. I'm never going to get up there. So what we did, and I think I've never been a CrossFit member, Rob, but I think things like CrossFit gyms such as like that, they've done a great job at just celebrating personal records. So in our weight room, again, I used a dry erase board. I think this is great. It would have your name. And then the first thing it would ask you is, how much sleep did you get last night? So a player walks into the weight room. He's got to write how much sleep, how many ounces of water did you drink today? And there'd be a spot for them to write, how much protein did I consume today? Right. And they have to track that. And then, there was a spot for each athlete's personal record on certain lifts. And anytime an athlete would break that record, as a team, we want to celebrate it, ring the bell or whatever you want to do. So I think that's a great way, again, of tracking some things externally and have some motivation, but then really just trying to be the best version of yourself and trying to compete against yourself. And I know a lot of coaches talk about the process, but do we actually encourage it? Do we award it, during practice? If I'm going to talk about the process of, hey, we want to get stronger, well, then we better, award sleep and recovery and different things. And I think that gets lost in a lot of programs.
Well said. That's some good stuff. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to hear your thoughts on coaching this generation of athletes. So let's say kids born after 2000. How do you think this generation of kid has changed, and how have they stayed the same in terms of how we should coach them?
It's a great question, Rob. And I'll say, and I'm not sure, this isn't my original. I heard this on a podcast. It might have been Tim Elmore on the Growing Leaders podcast.
I knew I liked you. That's our guy.
Yeah. So it might have been him, but I think one time he made the claim and he said, a lot of people say, oh, kids aren't as tough as they used to be, and they complain about it. And he kind of flipped the script and said, you know what? This generation of kids may be tougher. Like, I never went through a pandemic when I was in high school, right? Like, I never had to go to class virtually and do some of these things. So I think sometimes we're pretty quick as adults, as coaches, to jump to the negative because it's not the good old days like, how we remember it. I think kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. And I've seen it throughout my coaching journey. I think coaches just need to have high expectations. They need to be fair and have, but high expectations, I think, are good. I think a lot of coaches would be surprised how much kids can learn and retain if we set up practice the correct way. One thing coaches might do is they watch game film and they see, okay, we were bad at this certain tactic during the game. So the next week in practice, we're going to work on that, several times throughout the week, right? That's going to be a big emphasis. And then we go to the game and we just assume that, these kids are robots or something, and they're magically going to be perfect at that skill that we just worked on a couple times throughout the week. When in reality, right, we know it might take up, 4 to 6 weeks for someone to improve at something. So I think we need to look in a mirror as coaches and say, okay, how am I teaching? How am I leading? How am I coaching? Let's be fair, but let's hold the standard high, because I think these kids can do it.
Well said. I think something you said triggered this. So me and my partner that's working on the Impactful Coaching Project with me, we talk about the 3 C's: competent, caring, constant. But the competency piece, I think, is in just knowing what you're talking about. I think has elevated in the last 5 or 10 years with the access to information. Where if you don't know your stuff as a coach, you're either lazy or you lack wisdom, because it's hard to discern. There's so much out there, and there's people putting bad stuff out there that are great marketers, and your kids are going to believe that. And you need to be able to prove your case of why you know what you're talking about. So I think that's a change that's probably more good than bad, but certainly complicates the teaching process for coaches.
And Rob, I think that's one reason too. Athletic departments who bring in a group, maybe like PCA or like lead, who not only talk to athletes and coaches, but also parents, is so important, because as a coach, you might be, you have one way you want to do it, and you're trying to coach that. And the athlete, there's so much information out there that maybe is hearing information from other places, or their parents maybe don't understand exactly what it is you're trying to do as a coach. They don't understand the scheme or whatnot, are putting other information. So it's just great when you can kind of sit down as a department and say, yeah, we're going to talk to our coaches, but we're also going to talk to our athletes, and we're also going to talk to our parents. So now everyone is speaking the same language, because you're right, there is so much out there.
You mentioned Joe Ehrmann earlier. A big fan. He has 4 questions coaches should answer in one of his books, and I want to ask you one of those now. But I want you to think about you as a first-year coach, and then you now. How did it, or how does it feel to be coached by you?
It's a great question. And you mentioned Joe Ehrmann. My favorite book he's in actually is called A Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks. And Joe's not the focal point of that book, although he's a main character. And I just
unbelievable book.
Someday I want to thank Jeffrey Marks and Joe Ehrmann for they encourage you in the book to actually have a real conversation. Maybe Jeffrey Marks did with his dad. And I was able to do that before my dad passed away. And some of those questions I probably never would have asked if it wasn't for Jeffrey Marks and his book. So if you at all have an interest in football, or you're a father or son, I would highly recommend that book. You mentioned, Rob, how does it feel to be coached like you? I think self-evaluation can be pretty difficult sometimes. I just want to be known as a coach, again, who cares about the individuals that I coach. And I want to be known as an effort guy, in the sense of, I might not know all the answers right now, but I guarantee Coach Nelson is going to find that answer by tomorrow's practice, right? So I don't think I pretend to be a know-it-all by any sort, but I definitely try to make it known that, hey, I am here to help you be at your best, and if there's something I don't know, I'm going to find out. right? So I really try to maximize the day. And one thing my wife got for me when we left our first head coaching stop, she had, all the kids write letters and different things. And you read those letters, and you get emotional reading them because they're very powerful. But I think one of the most powerful things that someone wrote is that this was at the time. Hopefully, I'm still doing this, but it said, Coach Nelson doesn't just talk about this lead philosophy; he lives it. And to me, that's the greatest compliment I think I've ever got, especially by a player that I've coached. Is that it's not just talking the talk, but it's striving to walk the walk, right? Could I be more loving? Could I give more effort? Could I be more positive? Could I be more disciplined? Yeah, I think. But if we made every effort to do those things and players noticed, right? That's a huge compliment.
Yeah, right on. Cool. We're gonna wrap this up. We always end with a rapid fire round. So here are the rules. I'm going to ask 5 or 6 questions. You have no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of them.
Okay.
I like a plan.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. First one. What's one thing we haven't covered that we should have?
I'll say that the lead acronym, I believe, came from God. I believe it came from Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian, and I don't want it to be, here's what I came up with. I believe that he showed that to me through my life, through my influences. So I hope he gets the credit.
Right on. I'm real interested in answer on this after all the books we've talked about today. What is the book or books that you've given most as a gift, and why?
Okay. So man, that's tough. I'll say, Pete Carroll's book, Win Forever, especially with young coaches. I really want them to come up with that coaching philosophy. In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day by Mark Batterson is a really good book, especially for a Christian audience that someone gave to me, and it kind of changed my life. And then thirdly, I'll say the Double Goal Coaching book by Jim Thompson. This is just a book that when I was reading it, Rob, I stopped, I went on Amazon, and I just started ordering copies for all of my old professors and all of the guys I knew who coached and ladies, and said, you really need to be coaching this way. So I would say those. I'll add one more. The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. I really like his podcast as well. And that's a great book if you're looking for a short daily kind of devotional.
Cool. How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
When you say apparent, are you saying like one of my parents?
No, apparent, like something that seemed like a failure.
Let me tell you how my parents failed me. Okay. When I was someone said there's a quote out there that says the youth is wasted on the young, I think. But I remember being young and wrapping up my identity into things that went away, right? And for me it was relationships, and I just remember looking back and wish I wouldn't have really put who I was into that. And you live and you learn, and I'm better now, but I've certainly learned through that as a young man.
Yeah, that resonates with me. What is your favorite podcast?
Oh wow. Can I say this one?
We'll take that in the positive review, but you got to name one more.
Oh, okay. Increase Your Impact by Justin Sua. He's been doing thousands of these over the years. Just a quick daily, kind of inspiration. He's the mental performance coach for the Tampa Bay Rays. And I play this in I'm a school teacher, so all of my health classes, we open the day listening to Justin Sua's podcast. So great things if you're looking for just a quick bite. I'll also plug, since I'm here, I really like Dr. Michael Gervais and the Finding Mastery podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does. There are so many podcasts. I was fortunate enough just to promote this book to appear on a few of them. So if you type my name into podcasts and you see, any different ones, The Way of Champions with John O'Sullivan and Jerry Lynch, I was really excited to go on that. And I think there's a guy named Quietus Coffee out in Seattle. He's got a new podcast called Be the Torch. That was really good. And again, for any Christian listening, the Sports Spectrum podcast is a phenomenal listen.
Cool. How do you define success in your work?
Just feeling like it's meaningful. I've went through times in my life where I really feel like I'm making a difference, and that's all it's about, right? Cool. And there are times, I think that's the most frustrating thing. Like I can deal with losing a game as long as I feel like I'm making a difference and I'm doing my best. And but when you lose a game and you feel like you're not making a difference, that's the tough thing to swallow. There's coaching is, it's a very, you might not ever see the result of the work you do, right? It might be 10 years down the road when that young man or lady, when your voice speaks into their head and maybe they change their ways. And it may not happen at all. There's a quote out there. It says, the best part about digging a hole is once you're done, you have a hole. Mm-hmm. So that's instant gratification. I see the results of my labor. And with coaching, sometimes you can't see it, but that's going to sink in. But when you feel like it might not sink in, that's hard for me to deal with.
Yeah. All right. Last one. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
This is kind of off topic, I guess. I went totally plant-based with my diet roughly 5 years ago, maybe 6-ish, but roughly that time. And I just feel a lot better. So, that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, I definitely, I've lost some weight. I've kept it off, and I feel better.
Cool. I always get interesting answers on that last one. So that's an interesting answer.
Rob, this went way too fast. I end right now, and I'm like, wow, there's so many other things I want to say, but thank you for allowing me to speak. And if anyone listened today, just thank you for taking your time. That's the most precious resource we have, right, is our time. So if you listen this far, like, thank you so much.
Yeah, and everybody listening, all Levi's contact info will be in the show notes, and you can buy his book on Amazon, L-E-A-D, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. So, Levi, thanks a lot. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to future engagement.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. And again, with that book, I think that better way, Rob, to get that is just type in Levi Nelson on Amazon. So I really look forward to connecting further. Anyone on your audience, if they want to reach out, that's one of my favorite things of doing podcasts is you get to connect with coaches all over the country. So please reach out.
Cool. All right. Thanks again, Levi.
Thanks, Rob.
Beyond Coaching is a podcast of the Impactful Coaching Project in partnership with Friends University. The Impactful Coaching Project seeks to develop coaches that coach the whole person. The Impactful Coaching Project is the thought leader in coaching the 21st century athlete and produces training, information, and original research to help coaches develop. For more information, check out impactfulcoachingproject.substack.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Coaching. We hope today's discussion provided you with insights into understanding and leading. As always, thank you to the 3D Institute and Friends University for their support and passion for empowering leaders. And if you have any questions for today's guest or myself, all our contact information is in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in. Beyond Coaching is a podcast of the Impactful Coaching Project in partnership with Friends University. The Impactful Coaching Project seeks to develop coaches that coach the whole person. The Impactful Coaching Project is the thought leader in coaching the 21st century athlete and produces training, information, and original research to help coaches develop. For more information, check out impactfulcoachingproject.substack.com. Thank you for listening.